Welcome to Teen Talks. Today we're talking about decision making. Hi, I'm Audrey. Welcome to Teen Talks. Today we're talking about Esther and decision making, but first here's a fun baking tip. Say you bought some cookies like 2 days ago, and you're taking about a cookie, and you're thinking to yourself, man, this cookie is dry. What should I do? Take a piece of bread and put it in your bag of cookies or your cookie jar. The cookies will absorb the moisture, making the cookies last longer. Man, I need more room for the bread. Today we're talking about Esther and good decision making. So Esther was a Jewish girl, and her uncle Mordecai, they were both poor and they were definitely not royalty. And then one day, the queen, the old queen, just was kicked out. She did something wrong. And so King Xerxes, the king, he basically makes a beauty pageant kind of thing to see who would be the next queen. And Mordecai wants the best for his niece, so he enters her in it. She doesn't tell anyone she's a Jew, which is probably for the best. So they give her all these special beauty treatments and special food, and in the end, King Xerxes chooses her for the new queen. Meanwhile, Xerxes has a very mean and rude advisor named Haman. He thinks everyone should worship him. That's not how things work. And he basically goes to Xerxes and says, hey, the Jews are dangerous. We should make a law that they should be killed on a certain day.
The Jews believe they can only bow before one God, the true God. They would never bow before a man, whether it's a king or someone being honored. They would only bow before God. So Mordecai obviously will not bow before Haman or before the king's statue or really before anything, because he sees his entire allegiance only to God.
Yeah. And the other thing is that you can't really you can't change a law after the king makes a law. Even the king can't change it, which I think is messed up government, but now there's this law and that all the Jews are in danger, and Mordecai knows he has to do something about it. So he goes to Esther and is like, hey, Haman's a jerk. He made Xerxes make this law. So basically on this day, people are going to kill us. And he asks her that she goes to the king and tries to tell him about it. But here's the thing. If she goes to the king without an invitation, she could die. So she's scared.
Well, like you were mentioning earlier, she remembers what happened to the previous queen when that queen refused the king's commands. So Esther kind of has to consider she has a responsibility, right? But she also has to do her best to make the king look good, because if he's embarrassed, it could be off with her head.
Yeah. So she has a decision to make. Go to the king, or she could die. She could die either way. So in the end, she decides to go to the king, but she asks that all the Jews fast and pray for her, which is a huge thing. And so she goes to Xerxes, and Xerxes sees Esther, but she is super beautiful and stuff. So he asks, what do you need, my dear? And so she arranges a banquet for him and for Haman. Haman's very happy about this. He thinks that the queen adores her. He is so wrong. But so they go, and Xerxes asks Esther what's wrong. And she's scared, so she's like, I'll tell you next banquet. So next banquet, Xerxes asks again, and Esther's still scared. So she says, I'll tell you next banquet. So then the whole thing starts over again, but this time she says, I'm Jewish. Haman, your great advisor, is bad and he wants to kill my people. This is like really bad. Xerxes can't reverse his law, so he's really angry. And you see, Haman had made a thing that he could hang Mordecai. So what Xerxes decides to do is hang Haman on that.
And then it's interesting because, as you pointed out, King Xerxes can't change his own law. That's one of the laws of being king. Once you make a rule, this is the law for all time. And he gives his signet ring, which basically is his seal. It's the stamp that says you have the king's approval. And he gives this to Esther and her uncle Mordecai. And so Esther and Mordecai make a couple of new laws in the name of the king. The first law that they make is that the Jews are allowed and encouraged to fight back. And then the second thing is, because the Jews were allowed to stand up for themselves, that then they actually had this wonderful, amazing celebration of what God had done. And the second law they made is to say there's an annual Jewish festival commemorating what God has done. And it's interesting because this is a Jewish festival, but it takes place in Persia. And this is something that the Jewish people still celebrate to this day. It runs kind of counterpart to our celebration of Halloween.
In my opinion, Esther's one of the greatest women in the Bible ever.
Hey everybody, so this one time, it was the summer before my senior year of high school, and I was invited to go on this missions trip in Siberia, Russia. Now, Siberia is known for being like really cold, but in the summertime, it's actually very pleasant. But my uncle was stationed there as a missionary, and he wanted me to join this college group and do this 7-week long mission trip. And I was really nervous about it. I was really apprehensive because I had never been away from home that long. I remember that in 3rd grade, I had gone to like 2-week-long camps, and I didn't like them very much. Like, I just was homesick. And so I wasn't really looking forward to this missions trip because I was scared. And I was coming up with excuses and stuff. And he was like, look, here's the thing. I think this is going to change your life. Like, I think it's going to help you grow in your faith and get closer to God. And right around that time, I was taking more ownership of my own faith, and so I thought, okay, I'm just gonna do it. So the plan was I was going to travel myself from Michigan to New York City and meet up with this college-age mission trip group at JFK Airport. So that's what I did, except that I got to the airport and I couldn't find this group that I was supposed to meet up with. Like, literally my only action plan was get to the group, meet with the group, and then follow them wherever they go. That was the only thing I knew to do, but I couldn't find them anywhere. And the plane was boarding, and I was running out of time, and I had a decision to make. So I went to a payphone, because this was like 100 years ago, and they didn't have cell phones. Well, they had cell phones, but I didn't have one. My parents didn't have one. I called home, and nobody was at home. And so for the first time, in my life, I had to make a big decision all by myself. Either I get on the plane, having no idea if I'm going to meet up with my group, what's going to happen when I land in Moscow. I don't know how to speak Russian, all this kind of stuff. Or I intentionally miss the flight and miss out on this experience. Well, my reasoning, my logic told me, that's the smart thing to do. Just miss out on the trip, because you don't want to get over there and then not know what to do. But I had this sense, like this feeling, like God wanted me to get on the plane. And I stopped and I just prayed for a minute. And sure enough, that feeling grew stronger. And I just had this sense that God was telling me, I want you to trust me and get on the plane, and I'm going to be with you, and I'm going to take care of you. And so I got on the plane. And about 90 minutes into the flight, somebody came up to me and said, hey, are you Justin? And it was somebody from the missions group. Somehow they had made it onto the plane. We had never crossed paths. And everything was all right, and clearly I survived. And that was the first of many, many decisions I had to make where I had to put my trust in God over what maybe seemed the most logical.
When did you decide to follow Jesus? Talk about it with your family and leave us a note in the comments below.
This has been Teen Talks. Thank you so much for staying with us today. We'll hope to see you next week. Bye.